I would like to invite our other speakers, if you would, to join Emma and Sinead on stage. And we're going to move to our panel discussion. I'll just remind those of you who are in the room that we need you to wait for the microphone if you're asking a question, just so that our listeners online can hear what you're asking. We okay? Okay. And we will try to get to all of the questions. I can see some of them on screen, as you can too, so that's great. Just before we do that, does anybody in the room have a question for any of our speakers? If you would just raise your hand and let us know who you are and where you're coming from. Great. Start with yourself.
Thanks, Aileen. A question, I think, mainly for Laura and Sinead. Have you come across any social supermarket models that were successful in a more rural area?
We have, at Ulster University, we have done some work in terms of mapping at risk of food insecurity and index. But my problem is I don't have an evidence base specifically with respect to social supermarket there. We've been trying to map where our most vulnerable citizens and where that sort of triple whammy of unaffordable food, unavailable food, inaccessible food is. So I can't really give you, they are. I know, for example, that we have sustainable food partnerships across at least 4 of our 11 councils in Northern Ireland. One of them is Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, which is very rural. Causeway Coast and Grange, again, quite rural. And they have social supermarkets present. But in terms of, sort of quotes and attributions, I have little anecdotal case studies of success and, people who are accessing reduced cost food and therefore they have been able to assuage their £3,000 of debt. But anything more specific than that, I'm not especially helpful, but I know they exist and we're mapping both vulnerabilities but also food aid provision as a layer over that.
In the north, they received the funding from each council receives the separate funding. So there were a couple of social supermarkets that we reached out to that came back from the rural areas and said that they used their funding to buy vouchers. So rather than actually setting up, because they didn't have the resources to set up a social supermarket. The voucher approach seems to be used. So they would get a voucher for to Tesco or wherever the local store would be. And that was the approach used in some of the rural communities we spoke to.
And there was one more question here. Stop. Mm-hmm. You're waiting for the mic.
Hi, it was actually a question for Robert, if that's all right. With regards to research, I was just looking at the statistics, Northern Ireland versus Republic of Ireland, and it seems the higher percentage of what someone has to pay from their social protection is much higher in Northern Ireland. And I was wondering, in my head, I was thinking, is the food not cheaper? But I was wondering what drives that much higher percentage in the north.
Do you mind?
So I think fundamentally, it's the level of benefits in Northern Ireland is just proportionately lower compared to the south. Obviously, just context in that and part of our services linked against the income needs. But when we look then at food as proportion of the income, it's much higher. The food costs are also seem to be higher in the minimum basket in the north compared to the south. It's just a range of factors. It's not down to any one thing. I know anecdotally we might maybe expect it's always cheaper north of the border, but it just doesn't seem to be the case for the minimum basket. And then the incomes are lower, so that just takes a bigger share.
That chimes with some of the findings from our ESRI report earlier in the year as well, so it might be worth looking up that as well. We have some questions from our online audience, and there's probably several of you who can answer this first one. Can you comment on holiday hunger and the impact of 9 weeks? So I think this is someone from Ireland who's asking this question, without school meals. Maybe Yvonne or...
we do some work on holiday hunger and cross care through our youth services. So we offer breakfast every morning just to get the young people in to check if they're all right. And then, of course, our service is available. The service I've talked about earlier today is available 12 months of the year. So that's kind of our piece on that. That's all I could say.
I think this is such an important question because you're entitled to a free school meal for 200 days of the school year, and then magically you're supposed to furnish it out of nowhere. So I would just make two comments. First of all, again, I think Northern Ireland could hold its head up high with respect to its response during COVID, in terms of being the first of the UK regions to look at the cash alternative, the direct cash transfer into parents' accounts on a fortnightly basis. And that really was lauded as good practice. Of course, resources are not infinite. So we'll take every opportunity we can to push for that. And the other thing I will say is that's hugely important. If we can't win it in the hearts and minds in terms of, food and rumbling tummies, then what about in terms of if we have to talk pounds and pence? We are looking at children being the next economic generation. Their economic activity and productivity rests on them having qualifications and attainment. And it's a reason to things like the really good practice that's happening in England, for example, in terms of holiday activities and food clubs in that HAFS provision. And I would just encourage people to check out Margaret Greta de Fater, who is really leading in this space in my opinion, in the UK with respect to holiday hunger and learning loss. So just a couple of comments.
Sinead, I'm going to stay with you because you've mentioned cash first approaches, and you mentioned it when you spoke earlier as well. Are you aware of any further examples either here or elsewhere where you've seen good practice in that domain?
We see good practice in the sense that we have advocates who are campaigning for this in behalf. So we've got things like the Essentials Guarantee from Trussell. You've got things like the Independent Food Aid Network crying and calling out for cash first approach. Emma said already about vouchers and things like that. So something like vouchers and cash so that you can enable people to practice their own choice, assert their own confidence that way. In terms, again, of hard and fast facts about who's doing it well, no, I couldn't give you a case study of that, but I do know that there is a really concerted community effort, community of practice calling for it, and it would be our hope that it will materialise, because so many people today have said we need fair day's pay for a fair day's work and a fit for purpose benefit system so that we can practice dignity.
More questions from the room? Michelle.
Thanks very much, everyone, for your wonderful presentations. My name is Michelle Sharon from the School of Education in Trinity College, Dublin. With the provision of food through social supermarkets and food banks and other initiatives, you obviously need food. So I just wondered if anybody could say something about perhaps the challenges of food supply and cultural appropriateness in some of the contexts that you're talking about. Thank you.
I can touch on that. My role is food sourcing officer at Fairshare, so my role is very much engaging with the food industry and trying to source surplus food for redistribution to a variety of community food members, whether that be schools, social supermarkets, older people's community groups. I don't know if this is exactly the answer you're looking for, but I do work with retailers, manufacturers, growers and farmers, and try and engage them and try and educate them the benefits of diverting their surplus food to Fairshare and to other food redistribution organisations. It can be a struggle, especially to procure certain food groups, particularly ambient food, because it's so long dated. It is very hard to procure as surplus. And you do kind of have to rely on donations, whether that be from businesses, whether that be from the public through food collections. You may have noticed in shops and supermarkets you go into, there's a food donation basket, procuring ambient food that way. But I think we just really try to engage the local food industry, number one, on the negative impacts of food waste. Number two, the need for food, the levels of food poverty in their area as well, and where that food goes to, the impact of well, how far their food goes whenever it comes to Fair Share or another food redistribution organisation. So we would report back to them on meal equivalents of their donations, how much they've donated, where their food's gone to, the CO2 avoided by donating their food rather than selling it to landfill. I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but that's my perspective anyway, from trying to procure food.
I think it's really important in surplus food. We kind of work on two areas of work in relation to that. So one is trying to diversify where we're sourcing our food from. So we've run a few pilot projects with growers, which has been really successful, because obviously that increases the nutritional value of food, where we produce a lot of surplus here in Ireland. And then also the report that we shared kind of indicated potential for working with smaller scale retailers, so more ethnic, smaller scale retailers, to get more culturally appropriate food, and then shifting to models where you have that choice, I guess. And then the second piece of work is, I guess, surplus food is unpredictable, and the consistency and reliability of that shift. So to try and build in supplementing your food sources into that, and build in an understanding of how that might look throughout a year or a certain amount of time, and how you can kind of mitigate against that impacting you negatively and the type of food that you're able to offer. Thanks, Rachel. There's a question here on the screen from one of our online listeners. I'll come back in a moment to the room. What's the best way to include the community voice? Rachel, that's one of your interests, I know, so maybe if you start, others may be able to join in there.
Yeah, I think the answer to the question is kind of in the question, and it's to include the community voice. So to include that throughout the process. So if you're setting something up, or if you're improving something or making changes, to really look at co-creation and co-design and include those voices throughout the development, to make sure that there's kind of mechanisms for feedback once things are set up, that it's an iterative process, and that you're consistently giving space for participation and for people to participate as you go along. And then also, we obviously all have platforms that we can avail of, and to make sure that those voices are being brought into those rooms as well. Whether that's physically bringing them in, quoting them, playing videos, things that you saw today, and just making sure that you have a real understanding about their perspectives if you're going to speak on their behalf.
Do others want to come in on that point?
Just that I have a mantra from my first ever job is about let's ensure that we consult consumers and citizens from the outset, so from the very earliest opportunity, because ultimately it is they who live with the impact of the decision making. So couldn't agree more in terms of co-design, but from the earliest opportunity.
Thanks, Sinead. There's a question there.
Thank you. Philippa McKeown, Consumer Council, Northern Ireland. Just have a query, because two of the concerns that we consistently see coming through from consumers is about lack of fridge or freezer space, which means that people are at a disadvantage of storing fresh produce, making most of yellow sticker items and meal planning for the whole week. And then another concern is the cost of actually cooking the food, the home energy costs, and that restricting people to their method of cooking. So I'm wondering to what extent that's being noticed on the ground.
Well, we don't provide food directly to the service user, but to the charity or community group itself, and that is something that, the fridge and freezer capacity and space is something that we have really noticed. We're constantly being approached for funding opportunities, and people coming to us saying that they would love to be able to take meat and dairy and avail of our fresh food selection, but they just don't have the capacity. It's definitely something that we've noticed. It's not something we have an answer for just yet, but it is something that is continually coming up.
Just maybe to add briefly that I have experience of being in a social supermarket where actually a client, a member who was accessing food from that social supermarket, was being walked around the store for his first visit, and just to sort of demystify it, and he had to interrupt the volunteer and say, "I'm sorry, but do you mind not showing me the frozen and the refrigerated, because I can't afford to run those at home." So I think there's nothing more telling than that. It doesn't answer your question, by the way, Philippa, but just to add virtue to it, and just a second, and again, it's a tangential point in terms of, of course we want to make the food aid offer the best it can be in terms of healthy, wholesome, choice, variety. But there's also the counter argument, and I don't have an answer either way, by the way, but the counter argument is that if we continue to invest in the infrastructure, are we further institutionalising the food aid charitable food aid response? And as I said, people can't go hungry. We have to address in the here and now, but we need that long-term sustainable structure solution as well.
Very well made point. Question for you, Yvonne, from our online audience. How do people get linked in with a caseworker?
So, as I showed in the presentation, our services, we keep it really simple. We have a phone number and an email address on crosscare.ie on the food page. You directly say, I need help, and you'll get a call back from a food poverty caseworker who'll arrange for you to come in, select your food at a location that's nearest you, and set up the first meeting. So it's like, we don't have forms, we don't have referral systems. And just to go back to some of the earlier questions as well, we always say to people as well, this isn't your full shop. So we haven't the means to do refrigerated and frozen foods. So they come in and they get some of their staples. We have a company that donates household goods and hygiene products. So they leave with a good stock of products that are costly, but we say you're going to have to go and buy a packet of mince to go with that, or you're going to have to go with that jar of sauce and the pasta or whatever. But we say that up front as well. It's just to go back. We're not giving somebody your whole shop, but we're bringing down the cost of it so you have some free money until we get the household income up to the casework. Yeah.
Hey. Any more questions from the floor? Still have a couple online. How common are food pantries at schools? And I'm not sure who will be able to answer this. Is there any specific resource available for schools looking to offer food aid?
Sorry, you go on.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
We have a number of schools that are part of our community partner network. So some of them, I'm sure, do offer pantries. I'm not aware of any to hand. And I know a lot of them do use their food in kind of more school meals programs. But we do see a lot of pantries cropping up across third level. So really successful pantries that, again, offer services that go beyond food and looking at welfare supports and linking them in with those, and then also offering hygiene products as well. And we do have a number of resources. I know this came from online, so if you just want to reach out to myself or anyone at Food Cloud, and we have a number of resources on setting up a pantry, and then also kind of the education and capacity building piece for secondary school level, which we can share.
I miss just on that, the schools, I maybe there's more to that question. I don't think it's appropriate to be sending to engaging with children in this, so you got to think it's stigma. Do they mean, is there a food pantry in the school and the child goes home with a bag of groceries? I wouldn't think that was appropriate, and from a stigma point of view, we wouldn't promote that.
Would have to be very well through. You're fine for me, I think.
Yes, the only thing I really had to say was we support over 50 schools in Northern Ireland at the moment, and they do use the food for a variety of different things, including like an open fridge pantry and larders and things, so people can't just come along and help themselves. And I think it is promoted to the parents in a very discreet and in that way too, because the whole idea is that they want to obviously remove the stigma, and it is something you have to be so careful with. In terms of having any specific resources for Northern Ireland, it's not something that FareShare currently have, but if you are interested in setting up a food pantry or a food pantry in a school, or you're interested in your school receiving food, just get in touch and we can talk you through it. There's no, a lot of schools come to us and ask if there's any restrictions on which schools can receive food from us. Do they need to be in a certain area? And the answer is no. So if you want to get in touch and you're interested, just if you're here, you can speak to me after, or if not, you can just get in touch on our website.
Okay. And there's a big question here online. Long-term sustainable funding remains a challenge for all food aid projects, and several of you have mentioned that you're funded on an year-to-year or funding body to funding body type basis. And I know you certainly did highlight the insecure nature of this, Yvonne. Do you have any data on specifics about who is funding what?
Mm-hmm. Well, for the Republic of Ireland, there's good documents on gov.ie and the Department of Social Protection. So in the last government, there was a junior minister called Joe O'Brien, and he did some good kind of mapping. So, of course, there's all the initiatives in the schools, and then he had initiated a pilot. Crosscare got money through it, and a group in Limerick and a group in Cork for this kind of work. So there is money out there, but as I said, it's annual. We're not sure what's going to happen in a week's time in the budget, what's going to be there, but the question has got off in brief, but there's some good documentation there where stuff was mapped out and different funding and programs was listed from a government point of view. Yeah.
Okay. Emma, I might come to you. Obviously, you have a framework now to help people to set up, but you both described this as kind of first steps in terms of really understanding this area. What do you see as the next steps for research in this area?
I think a lot of it around, well, particularly down south, the issue probably is, and it relates back to the past question, is how these models are funded. So in the north, they have, I know it's not fully secure, but it's on a year basis, so it's dependent on the funding being renewed and the Department for Communities, but down south, they don't have that security of that government funding. So it is, I think the funding is an issue, and looking to see if some of these models can be in any way financially self-sustainable, like social enterprises, for example. So I think that's something, it's mainly around the funding. This would be one thing, key things, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think the rural aspect as well, there was a question of that as well. I know I've spoke to a couple of people about that, but just the challenges that are presented in getting food to the rural community, I think that's something that's quite an issue in Ireland as well.
Do you want to add anything to that, Sinead?
No, I would always want it to be person-centred. So I know government and funders like the quantitative statistics. How many have you helped over what period? How many are returning and transitioning into and out of food aid? From food bank to social supermarket, do they ever return? But I really do think that we need the hearts and minds one. So I would always advocate for the lived experience and for that qualitative research. As I say, not for research's sake, but I really would totally advocate for that co-design, that qualitative, that lived experience research to continue, because that's who we're doing it for, and we want it to be the best it can be for them, so that our citizens have the best experience and can, as somebody put it beautifully about returning to the regular shop. So nobody better to ask than the experts back under amazing.
And another big thinking question here, just to challenge you. One of our online participants has asked, and I'm going to rephrase this slightly to make sure I understand it properly. What are the two main asks you would ask of the public purse to really enable change? I don't know if we want to start at the end and work back this way, Rachel.
Yes, yeah. I think one of our asks would definitely be around that food coordinator role, and for that to be kind of shaped pretty quickly. It's been established in two places, so Wicklow and Limerick, and there's the value of that has really been shown in terms of being able to bring people together and to facilitate that kind of cross collaboration and that linking in with other services in an area, and enables the space kind of for that strategic thinking, because these organisations are at capacity, they're limited, they're firefighting, so investing money in that coordination piece and kind of funding those coordinators to be able to act as kind of a body and to do that kind of strategic thinking, I think would be the biggest out?
I'm going to take the opportunity for the two asks. I was going to say cash first. And my two asks would be work that pays, fair day's pay for fair day's work. And in other words, get rid of the gig economy. And secondly, and it's huge, a fit for purpose, a social welfare benefits system.
No, I think just similar again, this was something we spoke about at the webinar, why the context of our research in the North is quite unique in that they do have the regular funding from the Department for Communities. It's very different in the Republic of Ireland. So again, I know there has been work. Recently there was the food poverty groups being put together in the Republic, and there have been lots of good initiatives that have come out of that, like the workers being supported and other things in schools. But I guess then it would be very further support for food initiatives to be funded, as you recommended, Rachel, earlier.
Yeah, just to echo really what everyone else has already said, I do think one of the main, obviously it's been discussed, one of the main struggles for the third sector is the lack of sustainable funding and being able to invest in projects on a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year term rather than just year by year. That's going to give the project or the charity, wider scope for what they can do and put together an action plan for a longer period of time. So I think making sure community organisations and projects and charities are just a bit more secure with their funding.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, all of that. So a social welfare system that's a proper safety net for people, and that doesn't make people jump through hoops to get it. That's one. And that's, we're all saying the same thing. That's, we shouldn't need special shops for poor people. And it's just, if people had a proper safety net and that we could all go to the same shops and spend our own money, that's my whole thing. Because the damage it does to people in terms of their self-esteem, their shame, no matter how nice we make it, how discreet we make it, and the nice words we put on it, like a social supermarket and all these things, nobody should need to eat food that's nearly at its use-by date or that's in wonky packaging. So if we can just properly mind people when they can't work for whatever reason, that'd be great.
And we're nearly coming to a close for our question, but 2 more come in from our online audience. I'm just scanning here to make sure I haven't missed anyone. Are you aware of any particular issues that families with young children face who need food to feed their children? And if so, what are they? Particular focus on younger children. You might even need to up in here.
So something we've had observed for a period of time was a really significant increase in the cost of baby formula and then also other goods, particularly nappies and wipes. The pressure really peaked in kind of 2022 to 2024. It's eased slightly this year. The cost seemed to have come back down, but it was for a while. And STP would also been getting more requests for assistance, specifically mentioning the cost of feeding a baby.
And I think a final question that keep coming in. So, where is the overlap between these initiatives and the FEAD program from the Department of Social Protection? Do you offer support to organisations getting support from FEAD?
Yeah, we get that. Yeah.
So the FEAD program is now ESF Plus program. So essentially it's where organisations get covered staples and it's funded by the Department of Social Protection. It's consistent, they're branded products because that was seen to be a need for people so that it reduces the stigma around it. So we'd have a mix of organisations. Some would only receive ESF Plus through ourselves. Some would receive food from Food Cloud through ourselves, and lots of organisations receive food from both. And use them to kind of supplement one another.
Yeah, that would be that program is core to what we're doing. It's our main source of food.
And there's a comment being made online around the timing of funding as well. So organisations need to know what they have over the course of the year rather than to receive it towards the end of their financial year. So I think that's a point that echoes some of what you have said already around funding insecurity and regularity. So with that, we will leave the questions there. It's been an incredible, rich morning of content, which gives us all a lot to think about as we move forward in this kind of work, whether we want to develop our own social supermarkets or enhance or innovate the way that we work. I am going to return and get you to do a little bit more work on the Mentimeter. So if you wouldn't mind getting out your phones. Well, before we do that then, let's give our panel, sorry, I was going to keep you there. If you wouldn't mind giving our panel a round of applause. So we have the same question to see if there's been any change in knowledge and understanding over the course of the session. So that looks very strong. Lots of people saying, I understand the concepts and feel more informed. And some also saying, I feel confident and ready to explore the implementation of these models. So that's really, really strong results. So thank you so much for your input there. Really powerful. I want to thank all of our speakers. I want to thank all of you for your participation. I want to thank our team here at the back who've looked after our IT so beautifully over the course of the morning, and my colleagues in the nutrition and communications team at Safefood, particularly Anne and Laura from events. The good news is lunch is coming. It's supplied by Food Cloud. We have a big emphasis on sustainability as part of our events, which you might have seen from some of the emphasis outside. And we're really delighted to partner with Food Cloud on the provision of our food today. So you should enjoy that. For those online, we will bid you goodbye. When you finish up, you will be redirected to your evaluation questionnaire, which we would love you to fill in. It helps us understand what we've done well and what we could do better. And for those in the room, you'll see QR codes that link you to the questionnaire on the programs that are dotted throughout the room. But everybody, in any case, will be emailed a link to the questionnaire later. So one way or another, we will get it to you and hope that you fill it out and let us know a little bit about how the event has gone today. Couple of announcements for those who are members of the Food Poverty Network. You might have seen that we're piloting a mentoring program. We have called for volunteers to be mentees and mentors. We have lots of mentees, we have less mentors. So we would love those of you who are more experienced in the room to volunteer for that and help us provide mentorship in this area for less experienced members of the group. I mentor in the world of nutrition, and it's really a fulfilling part of the work that I do. So I would highly recommend it for anyone who's thinking about doing it. And of course, you can ask us questions if you want to know a little bit more about that. So the other thing is that we're also launching a very small exchange fund. So to go along with the mentoring program, it may be useful for you to visit another organizations, do some observation, or go to a conference or an event like this, and we're providing a little bit of funding for people. So that'll also be coming to your inbox if you haven't already seen that at this stage. So with that, I will let you go. Enjoy your lunch. Those who are participating in the workshop are staying in this room with our colleagues from Food Cloud and FareShare. And those who are attending the steering group meeting are going next door. So we'll see you in a little while for those. Thank you very much, everyone.